No, actually, we start with mandala offering and then refuge and bodhicitta. Sa shi po ki jun shi me to tam re ra le shi ni de ge pa di san ge shin do mi te o wa gi ro ku nam da shin la chu pa shui dang guru rana mandala kandiya daya.
Sanji
Chonan sogi chonam la chanchu badu dani kyapsu dagi chushi gi betsonan gi rola benchi sange drupa sho.
Sanji
Chonan sogi chonam la chanchu badu dani kyapsu dagi chushi gi betsonan gi rola benchi sange drupa sho.
Sanji
Chonan sogi chonam la chanchu badu dani kyapsu dagi chushi gi betsonan gi rola benchi sange drupa sho.
Kangi tuzini zone tawa tamje pambi chere tambi chun tenze kwadam kela chanse lo. Good morning, everyone. Happy Mother's Day.
Oh no, bit too much.
Ah,
Happy Mother's Day, eh?
먼저 배도지나 딘디기 당기만 있는데 지금 말았기 아니 믹스기 깨거다야도 아니 파베 튀지 아미 튀지 싫어요 말했어.
Being born in Tibet into Tibetan society, Geshe said that back in the days, no one celebrated the birthday, so there weren't birthday celebrations or Father's Day or Mother's Day, nothing as such.
최전에 시바나 아니 맞지 강자라야 아니 수수기 깨워도 된 거야 지금, 그죠? 밀리 캐버젠데 된 거야 지금. 된된 제거에게 아니 싸움도 땅인데 균댕 싸움도 땅 거야 지금. 니만 지금 깨가 땅에서 많이 봐. 균댕 그 땅아 밀리하고 싶어요. 이 밀리 된다 되면 제거와 상성 지금. 든지 지켜고도 왔어.
So then when you look at it, at least from a Dharma perspective, then for the duration of our life, we need to become mindful to remind ourselves that we have obtained this human body, which is really special. So we want to be mindful of it and also to appreciate it, to make the most out of it, to make it meaningful.
데레 데니 최전의 싸움당바이나 아니 파마디 가두이나 파미까지 된 거야 지금. 뒤좀 믹스와 지금야. 아니 많이 봐. 가두이나 된 거야 지금. 든지 차고라서.
And also from a Dhamma perspective, rather than remembering the kindness of our parents only in a specific day, it is something that we always want and need to appreciate the kindness of our parents.
내가 저 배배기 인tro단로질이야. 빼나다. 대상 요말 뭐든 이만 있는다. ngi amal buchu yores dinashin ta bugu pe mambu yorosra ani ta bugu nangi penata 부카시 저번에 부긴슈디 부긴슈디 아니 존나 잡도 중거레스 자와치기레스라 자와치 공벌라도 한 취지 로니치 대원데다 파마가슈디 디차리어서레스 파마소 샘 가슈디 부 자와친 대로선다 가슈치고레스 아니 니바디 아니 계속 자와치 매바나 부긴슈디기 아니 낭긴 겐키치 아니 수술이야 나말래 아니 또 밤에 샵도신 멋지 강사 아니 밤에 냠도 끼야지 안들이 치고레스
네 보고 담보세요. 네 아니 계시 보고 담보디 부모이나.
부모인 바이나 다 부겐 슈트 치고다 계속 부모에 바이나 다 부모도 나온 되기로 막 버튼 되기로
그래서 네 부모 견슈디 안에 있어야 되는데 룩스 요마로.
디오 아니 손 소거다 소거다 아니 거기 슈키 봐야 서로는 다 자식이 쓰거다
So there are certain ways in which things were done traditionally in Tibetan culture. So Geshe said that back in the days, of course, now it's changing time, but back in the days, Tibetan families, some of them were big families. So Geshe had 10 siblings. His mother gave birth to 10 children. And often, so you have boys and girls. It is a tradition that kind of, when you have boys, the first one, you send your first born son to a monastery, hoping that they will get an excellent religious education. Nelson, just take it easy, come in. How's it going? So, so the first son, you send them to a monastery, they become monks, you hope that they get excellent education. That would be kind of the pride of the family. If they don't do that, then the role of the first son is to stay with the parents, to take care of them as their age. So, they get married and the wife comes to live with the family, and for the rest of their life to take care of their parents.
최신 대교스 디코야 다가랑기 빙이 아메기 따지는 더더 용수 줘버렸지 가보 쇼진 대교버도 자체 자탄 버렸어 인자 더 베비기 아니 로단로 딘리레샤스라
So then Geshe said that out of his two parents, his father passed away, his mom is still there, but his mom lives in Tibet. So although Geshe would really like to meet her again, there is no chance of him traveling to Tibet and being able to meet his mom, but still kind of being here and teaching the Dharma, at least he knows that his mom is really happy with what he's doing. In that sense, kind of being happy that his life is meaningful in teaching the Dharma. So that's the way at least it goes in Tibetan society.
드리딘자 또 양계 개한절이야 드리 아미 투전이야 아니 샘디니 삼주유스로 아니 삼주유스.
Anyway, here as we today celebrate Mother's Day, and greetings everyone.
드리딘자다 먼저 아미 투전 지지는 드리 아마 피기다 아니 칼라도 제 냠바도 뉴 아니 파마긴 걸라 또 두스체나다 가우 용거로스로 원에 샘 가우 용거로스 니야 최쇼는 셰바이나 아니 가슈디 샘 가야디 직 뒤따도 샘이야 가투키 투야기 아니 파말이야 직 진투바이나 디 아니 부글이야 투나리 마투나리 아니 가두이나 가와고야지 연구연서 디 기체슈 저거도서 추쇼니 밤이 까진 세단로디 아니 추쇼 톤 상로 땅야지 파말리아 직제 투바이나 로디 아니 보고디 냠디연난자 맨난자 가드이나 수수비 찍고 친 대고 좀 바이나야 아니 상로 땅치 로 아니 로제켄사 아니 상로 고양부 땅 대투야지 다 연구로서 디 매바이나 칼라 제야 둘로 제야디 약부도 쇼르데이나야 칼라디 쇼게테는 닝군 trogoto그로스라 안 둘로디 단적하시 다와카시 긍거드니 조르그로 양자 고그로스라 인자 딘디기 케바도 체네 아니 난추 직장 난추 난 라브자 사모디 안 소소소 고양부 지역의 상로디 아니 파마겐골 데스트레트와나 자자자다마다 펜도 쇼 요사리스라.
So then in Mother's Day, we sometimes offer our mother a meal, nice breakfast or a meal, we give presents and so forth. That's excellent. From a Dharma perspective, when we look at the type of thing that we want to give a mother, we want to give a mother a joyous state of mind, not just once, but for the rest of her life. We want, in that sense, for our mother's mind or our parents' mind to be happy with us. So in that sense, whether we're able to meet her in person and spend some time with her, it might be that in some situation, it is not possible, but still, when we think of how do we provide our mother with mental joy, with mental happiness, being happy with us, at least from a Dharma perspective, there are certain things that we can do. Like, for example, if you're able to console your parents, to advise your parents, to provide them with ways of thinking that will make the mind be more vast and spacious and happy and relaxed. That is a way of providing your parents, your mother, with happiness and joy that could extend for the rest of their life. Because otherwise, if we think of doing it just giving our parents presents of food and so forth only once a year or kind of every once in a while, you might offer them breakfast, but still come noontime and they're hungry again. You might offer a piece of cloth, but then after some time, after a few weeks or months, it can be worn out. But then if you provide someone, at least from a Dhamma perspective, ways to make the mind more vast and spacious and more quiescent, then that mental joy and mental happiness can remain with them for the rest of their life.
There is that the Jidani Nanchu Jambi Godun Road, so Tereshasra, Nanchu Jambi Godun, so the and Sam Kuyambu Chayach. Ani Nanzumizanalaya, Kadu Karina ko Che Redos, the Chuni Mitsigi Tachi, Chuni Rojira. In Kadu Karitaba in a Kadu Donlen Chituyagi, Lot of Gale Soba. But di ta nanchu jambi godun so di ro tsit di na ta godun so direshas ro an tes chikien chewon di ge an pusto bu chaya an magi bachin shujin de desu godun megyo ro di chen pendo meban ta godun megyo ta nanchu jani di tes ching yon tang to ban ta di susu mezenan kelsan chi shu ro di chagdo as.
So then when we think of the meaning or the purpose of the Dhamma, it is to make a mind vast and spacious. So in our life, we go through different experiences. We go through different situations. Some of them are difficult situations. But when we face those adverse conditions, we want to face them with courage, with determination. That's, you can say, the meaning or the purpose of the Dhamma. Otherwise, when we encounter such adverse conditions, there could be even slight adverse conditions. If a mind is made narrow and uptight, we're not going to be able to deal with those situations. So therefore, if we keep in mind the purpose of the Dhamma, to make a mind vast and spacious, and you also put it into action, you reap the benefit of the Dhamma. This is the purpose, the meaning of the Dhamma.
Tirda the lela we yomara, the katup dance lounge, Sigoralia, katup tangores lara. The D katup understand gores at the thing on the chivaris. The D landed the thing on the Singzam D tonda, the ragaris, Kawasun the lover chasset.
But this is not easy at all. How do we face difficulties? How do we face challenges? At least from a Dharma perspective, this is what we've been dealing with when we've been looking at this text, Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun, a text that we've been covering during the Sunday morning teaching. So today we're going to pick up from the section that explains how to train with difficulties, with difficult situations. The line from the 7-point mind training, the root text that we use for studying the commentary, Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun, says, train in the 3 difficulties.
Tirda Nanzu Kang the Honyati, Ra, P. Muzebag, Tachi Kanga Yonyati, Gugangel then Levata, Ra Tenjong Tonda, 10 number Sanji Taduchiros, Tenjong Tonson, the Gugan Karis Landi, Nanzu Tonya di Piggy you Korang Tin Yobadoch, Ra, Kawadi, Kanga Songen di, you Korang Tin Yobadoch Mato, Ranki Semni. 중국어가 지다 소르기어 말았어. 오늘 시험디기 강아디 딱지 하고 제바이나 강아디 랑기 샘그톤 강아디 소기어라스. 대한 강아 소식이 규디 아니 샘라야 니샤니 직 니몽구촉 직 비기다 게위촉 라 니몽구촉의 샘디기 강아 소기어라스.
So the text says, train in the 3 difficulties. So we face difficulties and challenges in our life. And some of them we find to be completely unbearable. So from a Dhamma perspective, those difficult situations, they arise because of cause and conditions. They arise due to cause and conditions. They are what we call dependent arising, pertaining to the Buddhist philosophical view, the philosophical Buddhist view of dependent origination, dependent arising. So when we look at how we face difficulties, when something challenging comes up, we tend to perceive that as if it exists completely objectively out there. The difficulty is objectively existing out there. Not something that was created by our own mind, but it exists as a difficult thing out there. But really, when we check those challenges and difficulties, what we can see is that it is the mind that makes them difficult. It is the mind that makes them challenging. So when we look at our mind, we can roughly say that there are 2 directions that the mind can go with. There is the side of the disturbing emotion, the disturbing emotion direction, or the virtuous direction. So the things that create those difficulties for us are afflictive states of mind, disturbing emotions.
네, 배낭 안쪽에 착당 몽숨 뉴몽기 싸와 송여라서 착당 몽숨 슉 가주치와 뒤쪽이 마기바 슉치에 연구해 봐. 그러 율라 착비기 착바 가주 슉치에 봐이나. 아니 착바 채사기 율들이야. 비기다 직 아니 수승원된 난식 지금 맡아봐 서버리 만디가 서버리 어딘디 총원디게 아니 소술이야 직 소와 동가도디 슉치엠부 슉치 끼기도 와서랑한살라 비기게 미식이 율이야 가주스기 착바 슉총와 뒤쪽이 아니 율디게 내단 가주스 율바이나 뒤쪽이 소술이야 아니 동아디 아니 착바 슉총을 따기 동아도 슉총인 거래서 비기 율이야 기와 러나 찍바 찍양인 바이나야 랑기 샘그 착바 체종 토네 동아 슉 체종 제가 여보다 무슨 좋았어.
And just in order to illustrate that, when we look at disturbing emotions or afflictive states of mind, we often speak of anger, attachment, and ignorance. And they are the basis for all other afflictive states of mind that arise in a continuum. So when they arise very forcefully or strongly, our mind is made unhappy. Like, for example, when we look at our mind and see what happens when attachment arises. When strong attachment arises in our mind, if we don't get what our attachment wants, the object of our attachment, we either don't get it or something wrong goes with it. We react to that with mental pain. And sometimes the mental pain is strong, either for not getting what our attachment wants or for things not going right. The pain that we experience is strong. But then if the attachment that we have to that is weaker, it becomes smaller, it is reduced, the object of our attachment might go through certain forms of transformations, but the reaction would be less severe. There would be less pain for us, less pain that we experience if our attachment becomes weaker. So when we think about it, we might have a certain object that we are attached to, but it could be a strong attachment or weak attachment. The transformation, the changes that this object will go through would be the same changes, but our reaction would be different. With strong attachment, there will be a lot of pain. With weak attachment, there would be much less pain.
아니 동ар기 싸웠다 뉴무게 아니 뉴무 무슨 거야 뉴무라야 님부된 거야 두수 차고다 딥 아니 디간줄이야 콤시메 시체메 두시온데 딱 깔락하고 쇼지로 까와송을 넣어서 데리다 디 텔라에 같이 돈을 제도가 디 쪽이 아니 샘바디 서르줘야 아 기브줘야 고양을줘야 비 육간지 태바이나야 아니 샘레야 아니 교만로야 샘템부 데투야 사말로다 뉴무가야 님부 때마텐레 라리기요 서리스 로
And so if we seek to eliminate suffering, what we need to do is to deal with the root of suffering, which is our afflictive states of mind. And as such, as the text says, when it says training in the three difficulties, what it is getting at is recognizing our afflictive states of mind. Also, the application of antidotes, remedies to our afflictive states of mind. That's a difficult thing to do, to recognize afflictions, to apply antidotes to them. But if we do that, we can see that in time, our mind is made more happy, more relaxed, more spacious, more calm. With a continuous application of antidotes to our afflictive states of mind, in stages, the mind is becoming more stable and is able to sustain that lasting or continuous state of relaxation and ease.
니네소라 가슴을 라버 제시반는 당부 뉴문기 님보 챈까 바르드 도까 니스
Listen.
타마르 균추 까베 뉴문 외선제 니미 챈네 고토만네 도베솔란 베티 뉴문 비기다 균 툼무토버 차오스.
And so the section that explains how to train in the three difficulties in our text, Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun, says, in the first place, it is hard to remember the remedies for the disturbing emotions. Secondly, it is difficult to oppose them. And thirdly, it is difficult to cut their continuity. Therefore, recognizing the disturbing emotions and mindful of their disadvantages, make efforts through various means to dispel them and put an end to the sequence.
어디리다 시키치슈다 균투면서 버차고스. 그러나 난주 뉴무 균투주야로 뉴무 공부를 땅야기다 년가 빼어라서 뉴무 숙치를 땅야기. 가서는 안줄이야 깬 간다지 쳐봐야네요. 뉴무 기야 균줘야겠다. 아니 난줄 내 담보 걸어야 년가 숙치 못 빼어라. 빼나 아니 깁엔조치 라바이네야 디 아니 양자 피기지 아니 착선 치를 줘야기 gyulaya tanyala soba anin ransom chirdoya chagdo chirdoya ani kontro kya gyusno tanya gita nyinga peyoras tindri chebanta nyumudu gyun timba mase nyumudu shukchir tanya gita gyul drogra ta di sombayna ani maki bada cha mantik ba mangar droya shukchir droya ba yacha gyatamba so this sungores.
One important statement of the most important statements that comes up in this section is the instruction to not only dispel them, but to put an end to the sequence of our afflictive states of mind. Otherwise, if we don't put an end to the stages, the sequence of our afflictive states of mind, they will still continue to grow stronger and stronger. We come across different conditions, different situations, and our afflictions are easily triggered. Like, for example, we can think of what happens if we all of a sudden come across a big portion of money or possessions or wealth and so forth. Immediately, it's so easy for attachment to be triggered and to arise strongly. Likewise, competitiveness and jealousy and pride and anger and so forth. These afflictive states of mind can be triggered when we encounter certain conditions, certain situations. And when that happens, our mind is made unhappy.
Terdinza ani tangung kyew thangba ro namjuji and so penata ji pendu chubden lo soba ro keba namjuji so kesa pena ta jabi phule ya keba ina ya ani jasik le tanche jasik le ya jab choche ani kovi lonjo le ya nyembo meba sini ta kale jawandi ta thar ta kyew thangba me tsam logita ani choktu kursa chagwara서 le thambu kawle ya ani ngada pigita ji ani gyupen ya ani go khoba ina ani rangi mesedi katuk nal longre ya chi ra kal khar re pen dunga chir re ya dindi sigora dan khobi negi ani dunga teji ma to da ani tharduk deva jiandi dan hong keu tamba dan keba namju chi meba sigchin da ani 당분이 같이 둘이 난치는다 곰냠는 치고라서 이나 아주 뒤에 마트 봐이나야 디조야냐 야야 아니 상도단 디조라야 제수이란 치투 봐이나야 아니 쉬우지기 펜도 연구서리 수술이야.
We can see how it was done in the case of the excellent masters of the past, the great beings, the wise masters of the past, like, for example, the 17 Pandits of Nalanda. Some of them came from a royal background, being born into a royal family. Prince, we had situations where someone were born as a prince and then relinquished their status as a prince, relinquished everything in seeing the difficulties and the problems in living one's life in this way. And at the end, living their spiritual life, they rose to prominence, gaining the respect and venerations of so many students. So then when we look at what they have recognized, what they've encountered, the suffering of cyclic existence, the problems, the difficulties that we experience in samsara, they were able to recognize them as going through states of suffering. The great masters of the past have seen the great sufferings of samsara and have turned their back on them. They've relinquished them. They've spent some time in meditation, in putting it into practice in order to eliminate samsaric suffering. So we follow the footsteps of those great masters. If we can do it in a study and practice, that's great. But even if we think that I cannot really do it, I cannot study and practice, I cannot meditate like they did, at least we can in our mind develop joy and affinity toward those practices.
다들 디코로 쉬다는 다 망부 쇼치라 다 쉬어요. 이내 한탕한 좀 도시하기 다 탐치 택진 람도 줄세다 다 디테버 쳔비그 비 넘버 산지비 취 냠낸 치버 점마세 아니 테버 쳔비그 취 냠낸 칭이 촐이야 다 숨고요로스라.
There's a lot that can still be said about that, but let's move on to the next section that begins with the next instruction from the 7-point mind training: transform everything into the great vehicle path. So we not only follow the Mahayana path, we are putting into practice the Mahayana Dhamma. And so in that vein, here it says transform everything into the great vehicle, the Mahayana path.
레다 지당 탐지 태버 쳔비 람도 칸더스 큐르고레스 라바이나 아니 지 가도 가르쳐봐이나야 셴된도 삼로탄 투야기 아니 탑시 지 요서레스 라 가르쳐봐이나야 셴된도 삼로탄 투야 아니 내가 르가 있음기 내가 가르쳐봐이나야 셴된도 아니 삼탄 투야지 연아 존나 다디 태버 쳔비 람도 규르세디 트레스.
So how do we transform everything into the great vehicle path? Well, whatever we do, whatever we encounter, we want to use that for the benefit of others. So whatever we encounter physically, mentally, verbally, whatever we do physically, verbally, and mentally, we want to use that for the benefit of others. And if we do that, that will be transforming whatever we do into the Mahayana path.
데르다 페드로 샤바이나 간수 드린델이야 로종 예시 지고라스라 로종 예시 지온디 로종 시행의 근거는 로종 시카시 쉐가 고고라와디 직 셴달이야 타직도 셴달이야 직 페나 삼비 콜롱 샘틴이 키투바이나 강셰버데 테버친 빌람 규르세드 차고레스 더 규르고였는데 시에고였는데 아니 냠바디야 직 미셴라야 직 펜도 지야기 민남주 진직 용툴나 삼니 아니 넨딘디다야 로종치 티치등에디 야고치 년신 로종 치고 삼서 딘디 콜론지 케도바나 아니 년시 쳐바디 아니 태고친비 람도 규르세디 차고로스.
So just to illustrate that, for example, here we meet together today in order to study this text of mind training. So we can think that we have this opportunity for studying this mind training. May I be able to use that for the sake of others? I'm listening to teachings. May I be able to develop my wisdom so that I'll be able to be of greater benefit to others? That's just one trivial example of how we can transform whatever we do into the Mahayana path.
제번니스 랑기 군주 탐제 심진 꼴라 참인지다 대탐비 찬주 되니지 삼바데 뎀비 코치스 마통그 파르도 고숨 쩌바다 통도 테라 탐제 태버침비 람도 교차디스 게르블레 통음 tösum 제수 땡갸로 레금 땀 쩌바짬 기냐 넘버 군들돌란 편반네 데다 뎀비 따도 지주지 제송스.
And so the text says, all your actions should be accompanied by love and compassion for all sentient beings and consequent interest in their enlightenment, so that until the end of cyclic existence, the actions of your body, speech, and mind, as well as seeing, hearing, remembering, and contact, can be transformed into the path of the great vehicle. Beth Story says, whether seeing, hearing, remembering, meeting, or talking to them, always do whatever will be beneficial for sentient beings and will bring them peace.
대단 디낭올라야 다 로종디 건 타바도 다 개체슈디 잠인지 잔주고 샘세디 송고도 아스로 디낭기다 잠바든 인지 세디 로 잠바든 인지 세디 개체부 쇼치 로 잠바든 인지 로 비 잠바든 인지 챈딩 로디 소소리야 같이 수여버 뒤쪽이 란단 셴 참말로야 년걸 참말로야 아니 시대용야 자와치로 디기 자와치 차고레스.
Of the most important points that are found in this section is the indication that all of our actions should be accompanied by love and compassion for all sentient beings. So love, compassion, and the mind of enlightenment, particularly love and compassion, so that if we can make sure that whatever we do is done with this excellent, valuable state of mind of love and compassion, whatever we do in our relationship with our surrounding, we'll be able to provide others with happiness and well-being.
데리 까까라야 가서 축도야디 아니 잠지 좀마지 잠지 좀마로 다 용거랬다. 그래서 배나 아니 잠지 좀마서 배나 착바던 제비. 란된던 제비. 아니 잠지 남바치 레고라서 디기 아니 간졸이야 가긴 속다다. 둥가르 싸와치 거레스. 그 착바던 제반서 니무던 제대연서 다 뉴무다 만제비 same thing 잠재 싸마저다 아니 배는 인지 슬라운디 인지 동하다 단도기 삼바들이 다 동하다 단도기 삼바디 아니 착바던 제비톤이 찍은 거디 착삼던 제도 거래서 디기 맞기바 소거랬다 오늘 단이 same thing이 비기다 강 인지사기 율텔이야 동하게 날 수도 돈이 디 코나다 동아들잖아 찌마로 냠비 semba 짬마 짱겐 주여 봐이나 디기다 기부 소거레스 란신 이가로 박배부 소거레스
So at time we could have a fake sense of love and compassion. And just in order to illustrate what it means that they become mixed with attachment. And when they become mixed with attachment, they still remain mixed with roots of suffering. And that gives us a problem. So we might think that we are extending love and compassion to others, but if they remain mixed with attachment, we experience problems. So just in order to illustrate that, compassion, for example, is this mind that wishes others to be free from suffering. It can still be mixed with attachment. And if it is mixed with attachment, it will make your mind unhappy or unwell. So you encounter a suffering sentient being, for example, then when compassion is not mixed up with attachment, you have the pure, genuine state of mind that thinks, may they be free from suffering. If it is thinking of the welfare of others, not your own welfare, but if it is a pure sense of compassion that simply wishes for a suffering other, suffering sentient being to be free from suffering, it is a state of mind that can bring peace and well-being to your own mind as well as to the mind of others.
라다 지산다 인징오마디 라파쇼마 수술이야 레도 가야메바 로 수술에 펜 토자로 마토자로 수술에 레오여나 메나 간지 파쇼마 대원 되바도 동안 문제 봐이 균선 디코나 제치네 그 동안도 찾는다 아니 약부로 와서 동안도 치마로 냠비 로디여 봐이나 아니 진지기 믹스기 율디 수술이야 지 아니 남규 간지 땜바이 봐이네야 아니 콘드로마사야 아니 로범마용야 아니 니지 다른 거 대토야지 디 연구여서레스 저 당한도 니께 갖고 쇼지래더라.
And when we develop that genuine compassion, we have compassion that is free of expectations. We're not expected to be rewarded, and that regardless of what that person does, if it's positive or negative, we, from the bottom of our heart, when we think, may they be free from suffering, then this type of compassion is, first of all, genuine or pure compassion. And also, it also means that whatever the other person might do to us, we will not get angry. We will not become disappointed. And yet, it's very hard to develop that type of compassion, genuine compassion.
제 드는마다 태용걸 루무치 체가위 샬미 다 통화 탐지장 상기와 규칙 렉바다 땀도 줘봐 탐지장 디게 체니 상기살 차도 매벌 드로버 규칙 제바타오스.
And so it says next, and in the words of the esteemed Chekawa, may all those who see me become enlightened, and may everyone who comes into contact with me and talks with me consequently reach the state of enlightenment without obstruction. This is the yoga in which to rely.
대다장 nenjun 대단 땡급이스. 캡탄 땡종 콜라 제지 셰바네 잔주 기셈 종화 대양 율심진 초를 왔만 봐. 내가 사실대로 이 숨진 초를 왔만 봐. 긴니 시디비 숨진 콜라 초를 매봤다. 대양 아니 냐마 사강 따왔다고 카스 많이 봐. 흰 타바니 공부차 고디스 샤부샤니 rumdi member 규칙 통디 세버 규칙 제바타우스.
And since this is the yoga to which on which we rely upon, the next line says value an encompassing and far-reaching practice. Training in the awakening mind, and this is a pertinent point, training in the awakening mind also should not be biased towards just a few beings, but should indiscriminately encompass all beings of the four types of birth. It should not be disingenuous like a fisherman's visit to a temple, but practice sincerely from the depth of your heart. As Shapawa said, may they all ripen together collectively, and may they all be worn out through grinding.
샘 자마디 계약이 탑직 여버디 공지 대한 바식으로 아니 심자탕제 기니 쉬디베다 심자탕제 대원 되버다 동아문 되버 지규 임바티 아니 실샤진네 탐제 대와데 대는 찌마로 덴버 규징 양바다고 동아들는 찌마로 덴버 규징 양바디 야야 공지 땜바이너스 ninji kombase di chagol ta chamba kombase di teres ta di yang komdi temba na kansam jela ya tinji number de rang sem nimbo ti pigi la ya de do ya ro chi ro ma zu ta chi chuda ma so na pension de do ya ro chi yung ya sa ta di chagba na ro komdi shuk chimbo temba di chagba na ta teni ani sunrajil tu ba na ya shogri samba de zawni ne ba chi gyur ta tu ya di ta kombi ton yung go da sa 남산집이 취하는 아니 퇴숨 검숨 난다 검수 송고야디 간지 검지지 때 맞고 봐야나 내수 간지 신바이나야 샘라 페야디 카부쇼레샤스로.
So to develop that in our mind would only come through developing habits. So the habits that we develop are habits, for example, with thinking, may all sentient beings have happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering, and to extend that equally to all living beings. So when we develop that to all sentient beings, we develop that also with acquainting our mind, with making sure that our mind is developing habits in wishing that for sentient beings. And we come to the point in which this wish for living beings, for sentient beings to be free from suffering, to have happiness, is completely imbued with our mind. The mind is imbued, is mixed up with those wishes. So our attitudes now are there in our mind, so that whoever we meet, we can sustain that attitude with them. And therefore, we have no partiality. We're not biased with respect to anyone. So the state of mind is developed through the meditation, which is the third stage in our process of development: study, reflection, and finally meditation. So we might become familiar and knowledgeable about what needs to be done about a certain point, but without acquainting our mind with it, it'd be difficult. All right, so you're trying to clarify the word grinding. What does this refer to? Let's where. All right, on the page before. Okay. May they all ripen together with collectively, and may they all be worn out through grinding. What does it refer to? Dila shapawa shene sashdwa rokta mimba gyuchi tulsis seba gyuchi sashdwa. Chezan tultesia dila tuntakarinas. Dila inchige tolarwa. Tulsea di pena zokpa pena samba zokpa dene chicks lagerwa dru zokpa chiza tul dene chi tunta derives di ina di tunta karinas.
제자다 세규디 세고야 디로 dungar 들어왔어. 다 dungar기 dungar 세바체 볼래 dungar 그자다 뉴무투섬 세고다. 디 착당 모섬 디 피게 잡샷단치 툴티 벤 잡니 조추게 저라 디조르지만 조셔스.
When it says may they all be worn out through grinding, well, it refers, first of all, this all, may they all, the all refers to all of all our suffering, but not only suffering, also the roots of suffering, which are anger, attachment, and ignorance. So we bring them to exhaustion, we eliminate them. They all become worn out in stages in which we start to, you could say, cut them into smaller and smaller pieces. So if we cut them, break them to smaller and smaller pieces, to smaller and smaller particles, that would be like grinding them to the point in which they will be completely eliminated.
The Zodi Yemi Gyun Tongoyati, Gyun Shukjimbo Tongoyati, this Sunguyasaris, Benanganzugi, Jala Rojina, Gyun Tomaina, Yugsako Samson Roji, Jashako Samson Roji, Mijale Maga Lo Shukjimbo Givana, and that's Shuyari, and it's Sayari, Demra Soundangorada, Kurwada, the Gyun Shuton, the Dichiwarda, the Nanshingi, Numu Tusumlea, Gyun Shukjimbo Tomaina. 아니 간다 세고 전에 그 쌈에 속고 삼삼 용거라다 딘티치 용거그레스 이러 견 통고서 니무토섬 견 딜리지 통투고야지 제도 송고서레스.
In order for that to occur, we need to see the faults, the disadvantages of our afflictive states of mind in a way that is similar to anything else that you might have in your position, anything else that is damaged. So you might have a certain article, a piece of machinery, or what have you, that is faulty, that is broken, that is damaged. And you think that this is useless, I just need to chuck it out. Or there might be even a person that you dislike. And the more you think of how you dislike that person, the more you wish for that person to either go away, or maybe even sometimes to die, or to be harmed in one way or another. That comes through thinking of the faults of a certain object. So similarly here, we think of the faults, the disadvantages of our afflictive states of mind. If we come to see the faults, the disadvantages of our afflictive states of mind, the more we see them as faulty, the more we will be motivated to take action in order to eliminate our afflictive states of mind.
가리나 용 투야치기 라 투야치 다 용스사 말 상바이나야 용스야치 다 용구여라서라 배는 아주 신도지 도착 거스라바이나 만두 카도 때는 다 용무시고 소리지 이내 신지 배는 취고려야 로자타만 볼라바이나 그기다 도착 거스라 아니 잠수 보아티 섭섭 쇼자라다 이내야 코 사실 찍려야 아니 로톤다만 볼라바나 Peshdi insarsam di jamzu boare se tindin doata so dochaju tindi cha yungu siwasa dinan shingi ngazu semle ya komdi ya bu jiten tuwaina tandi kawla ya zawni ni yung msi ware samsum dia yung ya yungu asares.
That will be done through developing habits, and we can do it if we accustom our mind to do it. We can even do things that currently seem to be impossible. The impossibilities will turn to be possible through familiarity. And even though it seems sometimes to be something that is out of our reach. We can think of things that take a lot of time to do. Like, for example, if you just think of transforming a piece of wood into a stone, it seems impossible. But we can think of fossils forming over hundreds of years. Or there is a piece of stone or a piece of coral, let's say, that is lying at the bottom of the ocean and it's quite soft, but over many years it can become as hard as rock. So similarly, for us currently, there might be things that would be in the realm of impossibility. But if we accustom our mind to, for example, seeing faults with our afflictive states of mind, there will come a time in which the impossibility of eliminating them will become possible.
대조대 소수 펜바 땅땅 돈으로 펜바 약부 여바나 숙천부 지여바나 니 깨원 균친 배순 제고 삼비기 펜바 아니 지 깨원 깨와 바균 투야기 아니 먹이 집은 거 수름을 써봐 아니 송야 딘디 진 들어봐이나 아니 배는 녀란다 좀그 공부대야 아니 까친 담에 딘디 초사발 때니 토거리 송르다 까친 담에서 뒤주 겨름부 쇼지 깨시거라서 간지 공디디 겨름부 땡 고야디 안 뒤순 돈 거레스 디야 소수 펜바 야부 지어봐나 야자 야담바 깨원 균은 로투야디 용구여서레스 라
So we project a strong intentionality to do that. And the type of strong intentionality that we project is to do it from one lifetime to the next. We think that from life after life, will guard ethical discipline that abstains from the 10 non-virtues. So this is the type of intention that we bring into our practice. The one that does not focus only in this life, but the one that is focusing on also many lifetimes in the future and being committed to do it from life after life. After all, when we look at the description of the states that Hinayana practitioners, hearers, and Soto realizes attain, it is said that they attain it through going through innumerable hardships. They train with all those difficulties, which are countless difficulties, and at the end, they attend the respective states. So this is the type of intention that we should bring into our practice.
대다 양 체가와 준비 꾸시에카르스 로드 코난비 로드 뜻한 딘디시 송거다 체가와 준비 꾸시에카르 센총와 네바시 마총 건조기 장을 쳐버시 시험당 송 투글라 셰바 가야 마투라 시 슈비치스 샤브시티 조건 기동거 이난도 나포 지 데발라 대화진 이나원지 콘 총송스 공기대송레스.
And so the text continues in saying, on his deathbed, Chekawa said, Sechonwa, I could not fulfill my wishes, but please place an offering to the 3 jewels on the altar. When asked what his unfulfilled wishes had been, he said, I wish to experience the suffering of all sentient beings like a pall of black smoke over my heart, whereas I only experienced the vision of the blissful end.
그랬다 아니 야바체가 전부 둘이야 아니 심전 탐지기 아니 동을 많고 하지다 심전 탐지를 미비 저년지 전부 매바지다 다용 메시버와스 이내 공기 쿠셰가 될이야 아니 샵슈 로마 될이야 딘디 소야디 람딩 수다 담가러와스로 아니 라마 기브탐비 가르 송바디 만줄이야 담가인데 공기 담가 캐버친직다 땡구여서레스 갑투디
So Karayami Sibare?
공기줄에 딘지 매바지 투줄라 인지 매바지다 인지로 찌모 많이 바지 매바데 용무시와라 용용 바라 내가 공기다 뒤초마송 로지 공고 송라다라.
Now, looking at what this section is saying, for us, when we think of the great Chekawa, it's almost like it's impossible that he did not give rise to uncontrived compassion in his heart. But still, this section is implying that maybe he did not. So it says, upon his deathbed, he said that he wished that all the suffering of sentient being might befall upon him, what what he actually sees is the vision of a blissful land. So it almost implies that he doesn't have uncontrived compassion, but in some sense you can say that for us is showing the way to practice.
데리다 등하랑 고출러야 남가 간다지 고고레스 나온디 등한주 아니 균댕게 공야디 잠인지인바 로 대버침비고 추 자와 잠인지인바 다 잠인지세디 랑귤이야 개발이야 초사 접장 고고연자 다 초사 접장 그 케네치슈디 아니 라마 군조숨라야 아니 초버피야티 로 딘자 다 디텐라 다 담가 디텐 요레스 니나노
So what are the instructions for practice that Geshe is saying in this section of the text? Well, regularly it says that we need to meditate, to cultivate love and compassion. And the cultivation of love and compassion depend upon the accumulation of the collections and purification of negativities and obscurations. So in order to accumulate the collections and to purify negativities and obscurations, those components that are needed for generating love and compassion, the various things that you can do is to make offerings to your spiritual teacher.
아니 잠인지디 좀 많이 받지 약부지 곰바이나 곰치 아니 피다지 라마 군조스물이야 아니 초바핀 미치게 바이나 아니 대화전에 깨와디 다 모고슬라네 다 용구였어레스 라가주기 안 디마치와지 nga 대화전에 깨와서 nga 약부지 용한 쇼세 말람자데디 노르고스레스 라 물론 록베스로다 간지.
So then you take it as a practice for the duration of your life. You meditate on love and compassion. You also then supplicate the Lama, the three jewels, and so forth. And if you take it as a practice for the duration of your life, this cultivation of love and compassion, then your mind will be made happy and more relaxed. Otherwise, if you just think of yourself without the cultivation of love and compassion, if you only think of yourself and you think, may I be happy, may I attain a pure land and so forth, that will not come to pass.
예, 제가 지금 구시에카르 스틱 템바자 아니 당하라에 촌난로지 그라 나다 게르무치기 샤블야 툰 따라 게르무치다 공부 조가라면 당아 게 샤블 툰 대반자 아니 공로고주 코니 고송깔이야 가드이나야 아니 비게 슈려야 투섬시니 슈거다 난 타마델이야 겐치 만차 아주 두스테바이나 겐 숨쿠데주로 치 슈거레스 건도 추즈 듬바 제발이야 치 심디게 심진을 슈디 산이 추즈 듬바 제바 아니 심질이야 슈거레스 아니 난 두스짤 짜론디게 아니 젠 비게다야 쯤니 슈여바냐 셰레디 때치 아니 지 게모셔비 넘버도치 참선의 게치시온데 이게 아니 상금에로 시디게 아니 참자 게가라 고전이 캐랑아 니쿠데지를 초고데스 어딘디 콘조스던 거랬어 간지 아니 도 베나 아니 쇼로 어딘이 지오킨 자고만다다 오늘 간저로는 추도 니슴 도 니서치르니나 수고 나섰던 거도 괜추도 중이 쪽서는 게 자도 켜는 싸우니는 지옥으로 자고만다스 근데 별친 바베고 쇼진 쇼게디 조 특성 것도네래도다
Geshe had the opportunity to nurse his teacher, his root teacher, before he passed away. So he reached the advanced stage of 92 or 93 years old. And before he passed away, Geshe had the opportunity to nurse him. So his teacher at the end of his life in the last year or 1.5 years was mostly bedridden. So he used to finally go to sleep, let's say at 6, 7 o'clock in the evening, and then comes morning, the next day, 7 o'clock, it would be kind of waking up. And Geshe said that when he was looking at him lying on his side, it seems that although he was kind of lying like that, immovable for a long time, his face seemed to be smiling. There was kind of a smiling gaze on his face. And Geshe sometimes in the morning used to approach him and said, "Hey, is it not about time that you wake up?" Kind of trying to wake him up. And his teacher then would open his eyes and said, "What, do you think that I was asleep?" So then, and also it seems that also as it was lying down, as he was lying down on his side, he wasn't moving. I mean, for us, if we lie down on our side, it's we need to change posture to move around like every 2 or 3 hours. Otherwise, it's kind of turns a little bit painful and difficult. But Geshe's teacher was totally immovable, kind of used to go to sleep on one side, 12 hours after that, rise up, from the same position without moving.
제 배낭아 게르무지 ngabchungagulaya kyamigi tsangangla tsubaresra tsangangla logosa shurada tsangang logos shubigala gengta ta kyamigi tsangang ta tudita dukshudara ta mabsulongo olyarada 아니 ningu legal thedoda legal tsangwajin the ani khala yagu tremuda tame kambocha gengsunggri jablo su dedi namjung anzolaya kubkusha dodojora 자원이 참파 오종랬어. 파 나로바 샤요 말하다. 어딘지 차다랬어. 이내 갱 공다 피기다 메삼 니에르디게. 다 배셔도 제로레 공치 니마 떼샤죠. 안 갱게 안 투섬 시엔 슈유였어. 딘디는 거 같다. 콘즈라.
So the Chinese took over Tibet in 1949, and then 1959 things became really difficult. There was a Tibetan uprising, and Geshe's teacher was sent to a labor camp. So he was incarcerated. He was sent to a labor camp, and he spent 9 years in that labor camp. And those years were really difficult. He was still under the power, under the force of Mao Zedong. He was then verging the Cultural Revolution, and it was then the peak of the Cultural Revolution. So they were sent to prison with hard labor, and they were also starved. They were starved to the point where they became skeletal figures. And Geshe's teacher told Geshe that his muscles were so reduced that, for example, there wasn't any meat or flesh left on his buttocks. You could see kind of just bones sticking out. So he said that still conditions were so difficult, but at night what he was doing, he was revising everything that he studied out of fear that he's going to forget all his studies. So he spent those 9 years in labor camp, again, acquainting his mind, thinking of the Dharma.
그래서 아니 개인다 아니 뜻종간의 주름부 차디게니 타마 개인이다 녜치 산지기 땜발이야 차와치에 주여바이나 아니 까와지여바나 가 종간들 타르바쇼 대들 매바이나 아니 간 메시드니 체표 쇼스니 물론 개와 인수 물론 개니 아니 비기다 개인기 송단도 줘라 아니 비기다 same thing 니 아니 군조성래야 아니 이치진 same thing 니 물론 개반자 드루송송 드루치는 가 종간 탈니 타르바자마세 가 개갈이야 지동고 주주 레굴로래야 안 개갈라 tar jagala yung an jawarum chekta olaya an lobnyen tamadna ani chabitri oduksin da geng kutse and tamadus na yorosra.
Not only that, he kind of, as he was telling Geshe his stories, he said that at some point he started thinking, making prayers, that if there's any benefit or service that he can provide to the Buddha Dhamma, may be released from prison. And if there's no benefit that he can provide the Dhamma, he's willing to perish, to die in prison. May that come to pass. So then he was released from the labor camp. So he was there for 9 years. He was released, and he made his way in 1969 from Tibet to India. And when he tells that story, Geshe says that just his facial expression is full of confidence, as if there's no other way that being released from prison and also having made his way from Tibet to India was due to the trust and faith that he had in the objects of refuge. There's no other way. So then he made his way to India in 1969, and under the guidance of His Holiness Dalai Lama, he joined the monastic institution, the university, and took up the role of one of these teachers who taught Pecha, who taught scriptures in the monastery, and continued doing that for a few decades.
들다 겐콘족이 투섬 시단디 삼반남다 쇼여레스라 삼반남다 쇼여 칸스나 겐다 벤수 주도를 배우라 주도를 배우기 배울람디 렌종 수배우다 렌종을 배우는 렌종을 또 두디 자치 시에요 말하다 아니 잡치 시에진 배우다 단 렌종을 배우니 렌종이 아니 딱 겐투스 자와인 송디 아니 콘족이 아니 짜치무지 되는 세라지 타워지 되었을 때 디게 하고도 아니 차비하고 임바 아니 콘조야마치 아니 렌종 야부기 아니 게미티기 이아카 데산나 공가 데서 찌려야 지 링올이야 rum디 공바도 타니우였어 강바저사 포단로 춘주지 디 겐라 겐디네 슈주다다 겐디네 슈주 겐케데 슈스 아니 자랑이야 카리 고초나 아니 간주 퓨기인스 대슈로치스 겐디슈다 더 겐기 안델이야 다치 니스라르서다 안 겐기 툴이야 당한 아니 정간을 물론 텐저 야바리 당아 라운롱바질 레바리 다비기 지 소소 지 기부다 데우질이야 렌 데사라네 대대바는 다 싸우는 지금 말이스 안 야갈 수다 야오름치 우티비 댄서스는 같이 반조 아니 맞는 지금 말이 관심 갱이 르다는 편다다 아 그래서 디 칼스거스는 갱 콘조 지 피기기 지 론줄이야 차그매바디 더 짱마 짱자도지 데니 단 렌종이 갱이야 자치 피인자 갱이 자치 갑두가 셰무다다 아 갱 당보 아니 구수 짱마 주치 안타도지 안타시가 있어 딘디 셈바 짱마요스로
그냥 주도라 페바 탐보치 라인바 주도스나
조용하다
오케이 디 셰사르베 주도라 페바
주도 난 주도 세
okay 주도
주도
so Geshe made his way from Tibet to India. So as he was, you can say, fleeing Tibet to India, he arrived at the border with Sikkim. So he was at the point dressed up as a lay person. He wasn't dressed up in robe. So his appearance was as a lay person. Still, it was the Cultural Revolution in 1969. So it wasn't permitted to actually wear the robes. So he arrived at Sikkim. And then someone recognized him that he was before the Chinese occupation. He was one of those great scholars from Tsultrim monastery. So at the time, the wife of the king of Sikkim heard about him, and she offered him a house. It was like a small palace in Sikkim. And she said, just stay here, we'll take care of you. We'll provide you with whatever you need, just stay here. She also made an offering of robes for him. But he didn't wear the robes immediately. First of all, he cut his hair and he kind of cleaned his body, washed up. And only after that, kind of he started wearing the robes again. But anyway, he was offered this house, this small palace, and he remained there for a month or over a month. But at some point, as he was kind of telling Geshe, and it kind of when he was telling Geshe the story, his body was really animated, and he kind of had like this completely genuine and sincere approach to that telling of his stories. So he said that kind of he was he stayed in that place for a month, over a month or two, and he was fed and being taken care of quite well, and conditions were really comfortable. But then he was thinking to himself that he has made those prayers before, that may he be able to be of benefit to the Dharma. And if he is going to be of service to the Dharma, may he be released from that labor camp, from the prison. And since that happened, he said it wouldn't be right then to just kick back and relax and take it easy and kind of enjoy the food and drinks that people offer you. You've made that promise before, you made that aspiration and promise before. So he said he really needs to take it up. So then he traveled to see his honest Dalai Lama. He expressed his wishes to join the monastic institution and continue with offering service to the Dharma. With and Geshe said that when you think about it, this is an indication that he had no attachment whatsoever to comforts and resources, to enjoyments and so forth. But he was intending to do, as he was praying to sincerely offer service to the Dharma.
어디래 딘자 더 갱 남들도 배 님벌 당가서 로종랑래 다드즈라 아니 더갱 비기 더 강도 수 야갈로졸라 페바리스 야갈로졸라 갑투디 아니 딩년라야 납중하고라야 다 저름 우치비 아니 댄서 숨르다 줄루카게다 공바사마 또 야갈용 더디 갑두 박사 생이들이야 사제때 박사다 차와침부 ngema inchi ki jaga sumbi kabdula ya ani tsamba shaksa ki saja chiredo da ta dini kanga mabu shu chane ni jawrung chi jaga shung shu ni jaga shung ki ta jaga locho kala ya ani dansa sum tsuksa ki sacha kabdu di ta pena serada wajile chawa sumjal hasba ani chawa rela ya kala ki shinga ani khamba ta cheyorwa ta dini gen di jela levanza gen jela levanza kunzu nyamdo ta sajada rayo marwa ta dini geng sajadi shija nangwa rayo kem nangwa shija sabas ani gen telya nyuma khamba chikyap ani shusa teche ningu pa gomba latro gonda tsuyo te shuda ani nimaje gen do sta ko nyuma khamba chikyap dina nyuma ge den tse ani diga la shende na do shude digi digbar anya chi gen diga le gen dela dichor konda dela ro ande shadow doja digbar anye de soja ti kenchin judel di shadow do chada da teni gen ta gomba kharshi yazna tanga kem de den tigmen dos tanga jimi ta gomba pa de go konda saja shache gen gomba so peda tezam jetan ah
The way that Geshe's teacher used to tell his life story was really nice. Kind of, there are quite a few anecdotes and stories in his life. So anyway, he made his way from Tibet to Gangtok in Sikkim. It was actually this small house or palace was not far from Rumtek Monastery at Sikkim. From there, Geshe's teacher traveled to South India. Now, what happened at the initial period of Tibetan refugees fleeing Tibet and taking residence in India was that they made, bit by bit, they made plans to start some of the things that they've had in Tibet to study it or to build it again in India. Like, for example, His Holiness was under His Holiness, they had the three great monastic institutions in Tibet, Sera, Ganden, and Drepung. So then sometime after arriving in India, they decided to establish those monastic institutions in South India where some land was given to them by some of the heads of states in different parts of India. Anyway, first off, the first wave of refugees settled in places like Baksa in the northern eastern part of India, where prior to the Indian independence, the British set it up as a penal colony. So that penal colony was given to Tibetan. It was awfully hot, so conditions were really difficult. So Geshe's teacher, just coming out of Tibet and also having that horrible experience of labor camp, was not sent to Baksa, to that penal colony. Of course, it wasn't at the time a penal colony. It was just land that was given to Tibetan refugees, but it was sent to South India. Now, what happened when those pieces of land was given to Tibetan was that in the initial phase of the establishment of Seda Monastery in South India, they had about 300 monks. So the land was allocated to them. So each one of them got a piece of land to work a field so that they could grow food, and also a makeshift house. But Geshe's teacher, when he came out of Tibet and then traveled from Gantuk to South India, he missed that first wave of land distribution. So when he came to Seda Monastery, the land was already divided, distributed. He didn't get a field at Seda Monastery. Instead, what he was given was just a small piece of land in the new Tibetan settlement that was established not far from Seda Monastery in South India. But it was not living, it was not, the condition were not as such that it was living in a monastery, but it was living in the Tibetan refugee camp. So he built a bamboo hut, and he also had kind of everything in the hut was a makeshift creation. So also his mattress, his dwelling, everything was made of bamboo. And one day as he was doing his meditation and prayers in his hut, he was sitting in meditation and he was bitten on his left arm. He was bitten by a scorpion. And then he developed this massive bulge on his hand. So he kind of looked at it and said, that's it. I had enough of it. I'm moving into Seda Monastery. So he went to the office and said, that's it. I can't stay there. I have to move back into the monastery. It wasn't to move back. I have to kind of move into the monastery. And this is what he did after that. Anyway, Geshe shared with us a few stories from his teacher's life. So thank you very much for listening to them attentively. We will leave it here for today. And we'll finish off with doing some dedication praises. So dedication prayers. So we will do it in English. May the Supreme Jewel Bodhicitta that is not arisen, arise and grow. May that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chimrezek Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Sever of the snowland teachings and transmigrated beings who makes extremely clear the path that is unification of emptiness and compassion. To the lotus holder Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You uphold this abuse moral way who serves and banishful wear of all, sustaining, preserving, spreading Manchuna's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplished magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels. Sever of myself and others, your disciples, please live long.